So welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a recap of the new Netflix series You, season 1, episode 1, and it's just labeled as pilot. It doesn't have like an original, a catchy title or anything like that. So, okay, this show it follows two people, Joe Goldberg and Guinevere Beck, but in the show, at least in the first episode, which is the only thing I've seen, she goes by her last name Beck. Okay, so you have Joe. He works in a local bookstore. And one day Guinevere walks in. Guinevere is a college student, and I don't know if she's working on some advanced degree, like a master's degree or something like that. And so she walks into the bookstore and she's looking for a particular book. So as soon as she walks in, he starts to analyze her. He's trying to... it's like every little thing that she does, he's like a stalker. Which also, you never know who's watching you. So she's going about her day looking for this book, and the show has a lot of voiceovers because, of course, he's crazy and he's a stalker. So a lot of these things are going on in his head. He's not actually having a lot of conversations at this point. He's not having a lot of conversations with her. So there's a lot of him analyzing her based on the way she dressed, based on the way, her posture, things like that, her social media, her circle of friends. So it's a lot of just him analyzing her. And so she walks in and she's looking for this particular book, and she ends up bumping into him and asking him if he works there, and he starts, they start up a little conversation. He recommends some books. They have some conversations about books, how people read what's trendy instead of what's fulfilling, and the whole thing, and that whole thing. And so she ends up buying the book. So he had the book she was looking for. She paid for the book with a credit card. Now, because she paid with a credit card, okay, so he's assuming that she had cash to pay for the book. So because she paid with a credit card, in his mind, he took that as, okay, she wants me to know her name. Okay, so clearly crazy. So she took the credit card and paid for the book, and they said their goodbyes. Okay, so from that point on, it's just been him trying to figuring out her schedule. So after that encounter, he heads home, and he runs into this kid named Paco who lives in the building, who lives next door to him. He's like talking about, you can hear him talking about the voiceover of him saying how, the boy's mom is a nurse, how she got involved with the jerk. And, just as he was walking up to his apartment, you can hear the two people in the apartment arguing, which is why the kid was on the steps. He was reading a book that Joe had given him. And Joe was, just basically, he's befriended this kid. Now, it's interesting how people can compartmentalize. He seems to have an affinity for this kid. Now, I don't know. I guess we'll find out at some point down the line. I'm assuming that this kid reminds him of himself when he was a kid. See, Joe doesn't strike me as somebody who came from the most stable background. So, it's going to play into why he's so has such an affinity towards this kid. And so he had a sandwich, and he was about to go into his apartment, and he offered the kid, do you want the sandwich? I'm just going to throw it away anyway, because he knew that child was hungry. And of course, the kid was like, no, he said, I'm serious, it's just going to go in the trash. I already have something else. And so he ended up giving the boy the sandwich, and he goes into the apartment. So what he does is once he sits down, he opens his laptop and he starts researching Guinevere Beck. And to his delight, all of her social media accounts are public. And so lesson to people, I don't know why in 2019 you have to tell people to lock their account, but for whatever reason, people still have open accounts. They post everything that they do throughout every minute of the day. They're putting in their location. So technology is a blessing and a curse, because people, they just do way too much. And so based on her social media, he was able to get a lot of information about her, namely one of the most important things that people should not have public, which is her address. Well, it wasn't public. I think maybe she had posted a photo, and you could put the location on, and so he was able to get her home address. So after that, he ends up following her. You see him following her throughout the day. He knows when she goes to yoga. He knows when she goes to class, and she's also a TA. He's, analyzing her relationship with her professor. He assumes that he assumes rightly that the professor wants to sleep with her, but she's kind of brushing it off because she's in between a rock and a hard place. She's trying to finish this degree, and she's a broke college student, and she needs her job as a teaching assistant to pay for necessities. And so she ends up meeting up with some friends. So you get a glimpse of some of her friends. He's analyzing her friends. She's obviously comes from more modest background. Her friends are more well off. And so when they go out, they spend, but spending for them and spending for her is a lot different. So she meets up with her friend. I think it's one of her friend's birthday. So she ends up giving her this expensive gift. It's like she's trying to keep up with them, even though she can't. And he could see that. And he was just basically like, some friends, right? So, they have their little conversations, exchange gifts with the woman, the other friend. And most of them end up leaving. So one stayed behind. And she basically asked her, like, that's the Steve McQueen scarf. How much did that set you back? And she's like brushing it off like, oh no, it was on sale. And the lady was like, okay, Steve McQueen hasn't been on sales forever and a day. This was an expensive gift. She's basically asking her, like, how bad is it? Do you need a loan? And of course she's too proud. She's like, no, it's all good. And so for all intents and purposes, you think, okay, this particular friend is a cool person. She's she's alright. She's of the other two, of the three of them, she's the better one. You kind of get that feeling. And so, after their little encounter, she ends up going home. And of course, he's standing out. It's nighttime, and he's now standing out in front of her apartment. And so, throughout this entire time, like I said, he's still, still analyzing, giving his little analysis of her. Of course, all this is happening in his head. And so, he's standing outside her apartment. And a guy shows up, and he's like, okay, well, who the fuck is this? So, he goes into the apartment. They have a little spat. I guess they were in some kind of relationship. He cheated on her, and it was what it was. And so he's like this rich kid who's trying to he has this company, and he's looking for investors. Or I think he's looking for investors. So he they have their little back and forth. Somehow this man was able to charm her. He just a straight up asshole. And they end up having sex, and it was like an awkward scene. He could tell from outside of the apartment looking in, like, I know she didn't finish, right? So he have their little session, and they start talking. And this motherfucker, before he leaves, he gets a call from one of his friends to meet up to do something, one of his business partners. And so before he leaves, he says to her, it looks good on you, and she's kind of looking at him. He said, the extra weight. This motherfucker came over. He cheated on her. Came over. For whatever reason, she screwed this dude. And then he turns around and assaults her, like, oh, the extra weight looks good on you. So of course now she's sitting there looking at him like, this is a piece of shit. But of course you already knew that before you slept with him. Anywho, and even the guy, Joe, he's standing outside like he just read him for filth. Like, he just ain't shit, and you have terrible taste in men, and you got terrible taste in friends. So she's sitting around, and she decides, she gonna finish herself off. So of course she starts masturbating, and now he's just all in his head, and he's kind of imagining himself. Now, man, he's on a public street and standing in front of an apartment building across the street from her, and he's like all in his head. He's imagining that he's there with her, and he's having sex with her, and now he's masturbating out on a public street. And then what breaks his little fantasy is a woman coming out of her apartment. It's an older black woman, and he's, she's struggling with her bag. So he helps her with her luggage. After he was out there touching his dick, he didn't want to whatever. He grabbed this woman's bag to help her. And then she asked, oh, can you be a doll and get me a cab too? So he has a flag and a cab down for her too. Okay, so but that kind of obviously ruined the mood for him. So it was over. By the time he did all that for her, it was done. So Joe heads home, And again, of course, Paco, he's on the steps again. And he's on the steps because you can hear his mother and this guy in there screwing. And you can hear they always talk about, I don't know, where they're in New York City. That apartment must be shit. I don't know. It must be a studio apartment because he's sitting out in the hallway, and you can hear him clear as day screwing. So it's like, oh, okay, that's just fucked up. So Joe, he hears what's going on, and I guess he had already the boy had finished the book he'd given him. I think it was Three Musketeers or something. And so he took him back to the bookstore to get him, the bookshop store to get him another book. And so the book that he was going to give him wasn't there, so he ends up taking him downstairs. And downstairs is where they keep a lot of the older books, and they actually have this climate-controlled room that preserves the books. And so he's going through and explaining to him why, how to take care of books and, like, I guess the purpose of the room, and, if it's too hot, then it does this. If the temperature is too cold, then it does this. And so he goes through the whole thing. He finds a book for him and gives it to him. And takes him, and they end up going home. And then who's standing out in the hallway? The boyfriend. And so he sends Paco in the house and basically gets in Joe's face and was like, I think that you're weird. I know weird when I see it. I've been a parole officer for 15 years. And he basically threatens him that if he doesn't stay away from the kid, he's going to do something to him. And Joe was just standing there like, you ain't seen my kind of crazy motherfucker. Like, he just looked at him like, okay, whatever. So, like I said, at this point, he has her schedule down. And so he knows that she's going to be out all day. So he calls in a false gas leak. Because obviously they have somebody out to check it. And so while they were in there, he was able to get into, while the guy was in there checking it, he was able to go into the apartment. He was pretending like he was her boyfriend. And so of course the guy didn't know any different. So he just left him in the apartment. So he's now going through her stuff. He now has access to her. He's grabbed a pair of her underwear and put it in his drawer. He's like, when we're together, the place will never be junky because I'll keep it clean, and you won't have to eat these frozen food dinners because I'll cook. And this is all the stuff that's going on in his head, right? And then he finds what he's looking for, her laptop, and of course it's not password protected. So he's able to go in and just kind of go through and see all stuff that's on her hard drive, photos, and that kind of stuff. And she clearly has her phone linked to her laptop. So around this time, she's meeting with the professor who she's a TA for, and he read something, part of something that she's supposed to turn in. He was like, okay, well, you owe me 20 more pages. And so she's basically saying how, it's been a lot. She's been behind grading papers and the whole thing. And he basically says that, oh, well, you could just go back down to part-time. And she's trying to say, no, I can't because I need the money, which he does. He knows she need the money. And it's going to affect her housing if she goes down to part-time and the whole thing. And so he basically relents and invites her out to drink for drinks. And initially she wasn't going to go, but it was done in such a way that she felt like she couldn't say no. So she ends up agreeing to go out to have drinks with him at later in the week. And so as she was leaving the office, she sends a text to Benjamin. This is the boyfriend, I guess. I don't know what the hell he is. Saying that he needs to meet with her, that she wanted to meet with him tonight because at this point she's upset. And so of course he could see the conversation between them. And so the boyfriend responds that he couldn't, he was busy, but I guess he was going to see what he could do, whatever. So she ends up getting home, and of course Joe was still in the apartment, so he ends up having to hide. And so she's on the phone with her mom, and she's getting emotional. And because of just, I guess, all the stress and stuff that she's going through right now. Being a college student is stressful, and being a broke college student is even more stressful. It's unbelievable. So around this time, she gets off phone with her mom, and she gets a call from her friends. And of course, they want to meet up, and they want to go to some expensive ass place. So they end up going to this bar, and she decides that she wants to read some poetry. They have open mic night. So she decides she wants to read some poetry. So while she's getting drinks, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that she's going to do this, and I don't think that's a good idea. And so now he's listening to this whole thing, and he's like, okay. And basically now he's questioning her, this is where he started questioning her taste in friends. Like, your friends are basically, they're bitches, basically. So she gets back to the table with the drinks, and he they basically start asking her, like, are you sure you want to do this tonight? And then she tells them that she invited Benjamin, and they're like, why are you such an asshole? Why would you invite him? So she gets up. She is drunk off her ass. And I'm like, was her something put in her drink or something? Because she was like tipsy. Seemed like she had taken something, and on top of that drunk, a ton of alcohol, because she was just off balance. So she reads her poem, and then she ends up leaving. He's at the station now waiting for the train, and he's like, she walks down the steps, can barely get her drunk ass down the stairs. So he's like, oh, this is, his fortune. Like, he could, like, it was just fate, right? In his mind, everything that happens between them is just meant to be, right? Because he's crazy, and he's a stalker, he's a sociopath, narcissistic sociopath. So she's so fucking drunk, her ass falls on the goddamn tracks. How she didn't get electrocuted, I don't know. So he ends up going down he ends up pulling her up and helping her up and getting her some water and trying to get her help herself get her together. So they end up getting in a cab. And so they're talking, and she's asking him about why what he's doing in town, if he's there, if he's chasing something, or basically, because she wants to be a writer and she writes poetry and the whole thing. That's basically why she's there. And so she's kind of asking him why he's there, and he's basically like, he grew up there. He left for a while to meet a girl, to be with a girl, but he ended up going back. And so she talks until she eventually passes the hell out. So they pull up to her place, and they still exchange some niceties, and she gets out and leaves. Goes into the house. So Joe ends up pulling up to his friend. So Joe pulls up to his place, gets home, and Paco is outside, and he's upset, and Joe's trying to figure out, well, what is going on? What's wrong? And so Paco basically, like, the boyfriend took the book. He basically ripped the book, just destroyed this book. And Paco was upset because he thought that Joe was going to be upset with him. So Joe was upset, but not with Paco. So he ends up taking Paco back to the bookstore, and he was showing him how, because it wasn't like a first. He told him it wasn't a first edition. It's just an old book. So he showed him the process of how they repair books, and it was like, good as new. It's not, no must no fuss. It's all good. So you don't need to be upset about it. And so it's flashing back between Joe talking to Paco about this, repairing this book, and him having his hammer, this little mantle where they have to kind of, the binding to, I guess, for the binding and the glue, the adhesive to work together. They kind of have to bang it with the hammer or something. I don't know. So around this time, they flash to Benjamin. Benjamin gets a text from an investor, someone who's interested in his company, and the person is, I forget the person's name, but it's a well-known person. Of course, him and his business partner, they are so excited, like, oh my god, text him back, yeah, this is great, we want to meet with him. And so Benjamin goes to meet with the investor, and who do you think the person is? It's Joe. So he ends up meeting him in some alley, and Joe was very convincing. That's one thing about a narcissistic sociopath. These crazy ass people, they're very good liars, and they're very manipulative. But so he ends up convincing him that this, it's this exclusive club, and they can sit and talk or whatever. And so Benjamin ends up going down the steps before him. It turns out it was the back alley of the bookstore. So he took him in downstairs, down where he was talking to Paco, where they have controlled that climate controlled room. And how he was able to do this was during that little hiccup where Beck was drunk as shit and fell on the tracks. He swiped her cell phone, which of course isn't password protected. So that's how he was able to text Benjamin. So they get into that, and then Benjamin gets in this, but by the time Benjamin realized that it's not what Joe told him it was too late. Joe had already fucked him up with the hammer. But that hammer, he was showing Paco how he put the books back together. He swatted his ass and knocked him the fuck out. So it's the next day, and Beck, she goes back to the bookstore to thank him, and so she ends up bringing him a book, the Da Vinci Code. But inside, she had written some little passage, almost like it's like an inside thing, like anybody else who read that, it wouldn't make sense, but it made sense to him. And so eventually he agreed that at some point, that she would go out with him to have drinks. And so around this time, I guess it's kind of slow. So he decides, he tells another guy that works there, there's a shipment coming in. I need to go downstairs. So he goes downstairs just as Benjamin was waking up and locked in this climate control room. And they make eye contact. Benjamin looks scared as fuck. The side of his face is all fucked up. And he was like, dude, I don't know what I've did to you, but whatever it is, I'm sorry, and you got the wrong guy, or whatever. And Joe is basically standing just like you see in that photo behind me right there. He's standing there looking at him like, no, you're exactly who I was looking for. And so that's how the first episode ends. So he done fucked Benjamin up. He kind of got in good with Beck, and you have his affinity for this kid, which I'm sure is going to have a backstory that's going to be tied to his childhood. So yeah, that's how this episode ended. It's a good show, and it's very interesting. It gives you the insight into the mind of people who think this way. It was like everything that she did, he felt that it was either inviting him in, or it was a fault of hers that he felt that his presence in her life could correct. So it was just, it's the craziest shit. But I'm going to end this here, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.